Marcus Chen had always been the outsider aboard the Galactic Unity vessel, Convergence. As the only human among a crew of 200 aliens, he faced constant mockery from his shipmates. The Zephyrians, with their crystalline wings, found his bipedal form clumsy. The massive Gorlax considered him weak and fragile. Even the peaceful Mallory whispered about the primitive Earth dweller behind his back. The harassment had grown worse over the past few months. Captain Thexvar, a proud draconian with scales that gleamed like emeralds, barely tolerated Marcus's presence on his ship. The human had only secured his position because Earth's newly formed government desperately wanted representation in the Galactic Council, and Marcus was one of the few humans with advanced xenobiology training. Today's mission to the remote mining colony of Zerion Prime was supposed to be routine. The colony had reported strange energy readings from their excavation sites, and the crew was tasked with investigating potential archaeological discoveries. What they found instead changed everything. The ruins stretched deep underground, carved from black stone that seemed to absorb light. Ancient symbols covered every surface, telling a story that predated known galactic civilization by millions of years. But it wasn't the ruins that captured everyone's attention. It was the massive pit at the center of the complex. The circular chamber descended into darkness, its walls lined with more of the mysterious symbols. Strange roars echoed from the depths, accompanied by the sound of massive wings and the scrape of claws against stone. The energy readings were off the charts, emanating from whatever creatures dwelt in the pit's depths. "By the stars," whispered Dr. Milani, the ship's Zephyrian archaeologist. "These symbols, they're a warning. Something about the first children and guardians of the ancient pact." Commander Vexthai, Thexvar's second-in-command, sneered as he examined the pit's edge. "Local predators, nothing more. Probably some evolved reptilian species that survived in these underground chambers." Marcus studied the symbols more carefully, his human pattern recognition abilities picking up details the others missed. "Actually, I think these aren't warnings about the creatures. They're honors? Tributes? The grammar structure suggests reverence, not fear." The other crew members exchanged glances. Typical human arrogance, thinking he could understand alien languages better than the actual aliens. Sub-Commander Krex, a hulking Gorlak with tusks that curved like sabers, let out a rumbling laugh. "The human thinks he's a linguist now," Krex growled. "Perhaps we should test his theories more directly." What happened next would haunt Marcus's nightmares for cycles to come. As he bent to examine a particularly complex symbol sequence, he felt massive hands grab him from behind. Krex and two other Gorlaks lifted him despite his struggles. "Stop! What are you doing?" Marcus shouted, but his protests were drowned out by laughter from the assembled crew. "Just a little prank, human," Vexthai called out. "If you're so confident about these creatures, why don't you meet them personally?" Before Marcus could process what was happening, he found himself dangling over the pit's edge. The darkness below seemed to pulse with malevolent energy, and the roars grew louder, as if the creatures below sensed fresh prey above. "This isn't funny," Marcus yelled, genuine terror creeping into his voice. "Pull me back up!" But the aliens only laughed harder. Even some of the typically peaceful species seemed amused by the human's predicament. Only Dr. Milani seemed concerned, her crystalline features showing distress. "Perhaps we should," she began, but Krex cut her off. "The human wanted to study the creatures," the Gorlak rumbled. "Now he can study them up close." With that, Krex released his grip. Marcus plummeted into the darkness, his screams echoing off the ancient stone walls. The fall seemed to last forever. His mind racing through everything he'd learned about alien predatory species. Whatever waited below, his chances of survival were minimal at best. He hit the ground harder than expected, his human bones absorbing the impact in ways that would have shattered most alien species. Pain shot through his body, but nothing seemed broken. The chamber floor was covered in a thick layer of what felt like ash and bone fragments, the remains of previous victims. As his eyes adjusted to the dim light filtering from above, Marcus became aware of movement in the shadows. Massive shapes stirred around him, and he caught glimpses of scales that reflected light like polished metal, wings that spanned incredible distances, and eyes that burned with ancient intelligence. Dragons. Real dragons, just like the legends from Earth's mythology. 3 of the massive creatures emerged from the darkness, each easily 30 meters long from snout to tail. Their scales shifted between deep crimson, royal blue, and burnished gold. Steam rose from their nostrils, and when they moved, the ground trembled beneath their weight. Marcus pressed himself against the wall, expecting to be incinerated or devoured within seconds. Instead, something impossible happened. The largest dragon, its scales a deep crimson that seemed to glow with inner fire, approached slowly. Its massive head descended until it was level with Marcus, and those ancient eyes studied him with an intelligence that seemed far older than civilization itself. Then, to Marcus's absolute shock, the dragon lowered its great head to the ground in what could only be described as a bow. The other 2 dragons followed suit, their massive forms settling into positions of respect and deference. The golden one let out a low, melodious sound that vibrated through Marcus's bones, not a roar of aggression, but something almost like a greeting. Above, the crew of the Convergence had gathered at the pit's edge, expecting to hear the humans' death screams. Instead, they heard only an eerie silence that stretched on far too long. "Think he's dead already?" one of the Zephyrians asked. Vexthai activated his scanner, trying to penetrate the darkness below. "I'm reading 3 massive life forms, but they're not moving aggressively. In fact, their biosignatures suggest they're calm." "Impossible," Krex grumbled. "Those things are apex predators. They should have torn the human apart by now." Dr. Milani's crystalline features had gone pale. She was re-examining the symbols around the pit's rim, her understanding of the ancient text becoming clearer with each passing moment. "Commander," she said urgently, "I think I made an error in translation. These symbols, they're not about guardians or children. They're about recognition, acknowledgement of something called the First Shapers." "What does that mean?" Vexthai demanded. Before Dr. Milani could answer, a sound echoed from the pit that made every alien on the crew take an involuntary step backward. It was a roar, but not of anger or hunger. It was a call, deep, resonant, and somehow welcoming. Down in the darkness, Marcus stood transfixed as the 3 dragons maintained their bowing positions. Slowly, carefully, he reached out to touch the snout of the nearest creature. Its scales were warm, almost fever-hot, but the dragon remained perfectly still. "I don't understand," Marcus whispered. "Why aren't you attacking me?" As if responding to his words, the crimson dragon raised its head and fixed him with those burning eyes. When it spoke, its voice resonated not through the air, but directly into Marcus's mind. "Child of the First Shapers." The voice was ancient beyond measure, filled with wisdom and sadness. "We have waited eons for your kind to return to the stars." Marcus's legs nearly gave out beneath him. "First Shapers? I don't know what you mean." Images flooded his mind. Visions of Earth's distant past, when humanity was young and the galaxy was a very different place. He saw early humans not as primitive cave dwellers, but as beings of incredible potential who had somehow touched the cosmos long before they developed spaceflight. "Your species carries the mark of the ancients," the dragon continued. "The ones who came before, who shaped the first worlds and seeded the stars with life. We are their servants, bound by oaths older than most civilizations. The blue dragon lifted its head and spoke with a voice like distant thunder. We sensed your presence the moment you entered this system. The blood of the Shapers flows in your veins, changed by time but unmistakable. Above, the crew of the Convergence was growing increasingly agitated. The silence from the pit stretched on, broken only by occasional sounds that didn't match any known predatory behavior. Captain Thexavar had joined them at the pit's edge, his emerald scales reflecting the harsh light of their scanning equipment. "Status report, Commander. The humans should be dead by now." "Captain," Vexatai replied, "but our sensors indicate the creatures below are inactive, almost as if they're waiting for something." "Waiting for what?" Dr. Milani looked up from her translation work, her crystalline features tight with concern. "Captain, I think we need to reconsider what we know about this site. These aren't just random ruins. This is a temple. And those creatures below, they're not just predators." "Explain." "The symbols speak of a covenant, an ancient agreement between the first Shapers and their sacred guardians. If I'm reading this correctly, these dragons have been waiting here for millions of years for something or someone specific." Krex snorted in disbelief. "You're suggesting those beasts are intelligent? That they're following some ancient contract?" "I'm suggesting we may have just thrown our only human crew member to creatures that have been waiting for his species to return for longer than our civilizations have existed." The implications of Dr. Milani's words sent a chill through the assembled crew. If she was right, they hadn't just committed murder, they had potentially violated something sacred and ancient beyond their understanding. Down in the pit, Marcus was struggling to process the revelations flooding his mind. The dragons showed him more images, glimpses of humanity's true heritage, their connection to forces that predated known galactic history. "Your kind will face great trials in the times to come," the golden dragon spoke, its mental voice like warm sunlight. "The galaxy is not ready to accept what you represent, what you will become." "I don't understand any of this," Marcus said aloud. "I'm just a xenobiologist. I'm nobody special." The Crimson Dragon's eyes seemed to smile. "Every human carries the potential of the first Shapers. Your species is young, but your destiny is written in the very fabric of space itself." The blue dragon shifted closer, its massive form radiating warmth and strange comfort. "We offer you a choice, young Shaper. Return to your crew with this knowledge, knowing they will not believe. Or remain here, and let us show you the true extent of your heritage." Marcus looked up at the distant opening of the pit, where he could see the lights of his crewmates' equipment. They had thrown him here to die as a joke. Even if he survived, would anything really change? Would they stop seeing him as a primitive inferior? But then he thought of Dr. Milani's genuine concern, of the few aliens who had shown him kindness, and of his duty to his species and the Galactic Council. "I need to go back," he said finally. "My people need to know about this, about what we really are." The dragons exchanged glances that spoke of communication beyond Marcus's perception. Finally, the Crimson One nodded. "Very well. But first, accept this gift." The dragon breathed out, but instead of fire, a stream of golden light enveloped Marcus. He felt power flow into him, not just physical strength, but knowledge, understanding, and something else. Something that made him feel connected to forces vast and ancient. When the light faded, Marcus felt fundamentally changed. He was still human, but more than human, enhanced in ways he couldn't yet fully comprehend. "Call to us when your people are ready to learn the truth," the golden dragon said. "We will be waiting, as we have always waited." The blue dragon gestured with one massive wing toward a section of wall that Marcus hadn't noticed before. Ancient mechanisms hummed to life, and a passage opened, revealing a sloping tunnel that led upward toward natural light. "This path will take you to the surface," the dragon explained. "Your crewmates believe you are dead. Use that to your advantage." As Marcus began walking toward the passage, he turned back once more. "Why? Why did you wait so long? Why didn't you reveal yourselves before?" The Crimson Dragon's mental voice carried infinite sadness. "Because your kind was not ready. Even now, most of your species will not be able to accept what you are destined to become." "But the time of hiding is ending. The galaxy will soon face challenges that will require the return of the first Shapers." With those ominous words echoing in his mind, Marcus made his way through the ancient passage, forever changed by his encounter with beings that remembered when the universe was young. Above, his crewmates continued their vigil at the pit's edge, unaware that their victim had become something far more significant than any of them could imagine. Marcus emerged from the ancient tunnel system 3 kilometers from the ruins, his body still humming with the strange energy the dragons had given him. The gift they had bestowed was unlike anything he had ever experienced. His senses were sharper, his mind clearer, and he could feel connections to things he had never noticed before. The electromagnetic fields of nearby technology, the life force of growing plants, even the subtle gravitational fluctuations caused by the planet's core. But most importantly, he could sense the dragons from this distance, their ancient minds touching his in reassurance and guidance. They were not just intelligent creatures, they were repositories of knowledge that spanned geological ages, keepers of secrets that could reshape understanding of galactic history. As Marcus made his way back toward the excavation site, he carefully planned his approach. His crewmates believed him dead, which gave him a significant advantage. But more than that, he now understood the true significance of what they had discovered, and the potential consequences of that knowledge falling into the wrong hands. The crew of the Convergence was still gathered around the pit when he approached under cover of the alien vegetation. Through his enhanced senses, he could hear their conversation clearly despite the distance. "It's been 6 hours," Dr. Milani was saying, her crystalline voice tight with guilt. "We should have heard something by now, even screaming." Captain Thexavar stood at the pit's edge, his emerald scales dulled with what Marcus now recognized as genuine regret. "Commander Vexthai, prepare a recovery team. We need to retrieve the human's remains." "Captain," Vexthai replied carefully, "our sensors indicate the creatures below are still active, but they're exhibiting highly unusual behavior patterns. They haven't moved from their positions near the pit's center, and their biosignatures suggest they're waiting." Krex, the massive Gorlak who had thrown Marcus into the pit, shifted uncomfortably. "Waiting for what? They should have fed and moved on by now." Dr. Milani had been working continuously on translating the ancient symbols, and her discoveries were clearly troubling her. "Commander Captain, I've made significant progress with the text around the pit's rim. What I initially translated as warnings are actually protocols, instructions for something called the recognition ceremony." "Recognition of what?" Captain Thexvar demanded. "I'm not entirely certain, but the text repeatedly mentions children of the first Shapers and the return of the ancient bloodline. It describes a ritual where the sacred guardians, that's what the dragons are called, confirm the identity of beings who carry certain genetic markers." The crew exchanged uneasy glances. Sub-Commander Krex's tusks clicked together nervously. "You're suggesting these creatures were testing the human?" "I'm suggesting we may have accidentally fulfilled an ancient prophecy," Dr. Milani replied quietly. Before anyone could respond, Marcus stepped out of the vegetation behind them. "Actually, Dr. Milani, you're more right than you know." The entire crew spun around, weapons appearing in hands with reflexive speed. Several aliens stumbled backward in shock, and one of the junior Zephyrian officers let out a crystalline shriek of surprise. Impossible, Vexthai breathed. You're dead. The fall alone should have killed me? Yes, it should have, Marcus agreed calmly. He noticed that his voice carried a new quality, a resonance that hadn't been there before. But a lot of assumptions about humans are proving to be incorrect. Captain Thexvar's scales had shifted to a darker green, a sign of deep concern among Draconians. How did you survive? What happened down there? Marcus considered his response carefully. The truth would sound impossible, even insane, to beings who had spent their entire lives believing humans were primitive newcomers to the galaxy. But the dragons had been clear. The time for hiding was ending. I met the sacred guardians, he said simply, and they told me who humans really are. Dr. Milani's crystalline features brightened with excitement and fear. The texts mentioned trials, tests of worthiness. Did they speak to you? They did more than speak. They showed me the truth about my species, about our real place in galactic history. Marcus looked around at the assembled crew, noting their expressions of disbelief, fear, and in some cases guilt. They've been waiting here for millions of years, following instructions left by beings they called the First Shapers. Krek stepped forward aggressively, his massive form casting a shadow over Marcus. Enough nonsense, human. What really happened? Did you find another exit? Some way to escape? I told you what happened, Marcus replied, and this time his voice carried a subtle harmonic that made every alien present take an involuntary step backward. The dragons recognized something in me, something in my genetic code that connected me to their ancient masters. Prove it, Vexthai demanded. If these creatures are truly intelligent, if they truly accepted you as something special, then prove it. Marcus smiled, remembering the dragon's final words to him. Very well. He turned toward the pit and called out in a voice that carried impossible resonance across the ancient stone. Crimson Wing, guardian of the first flame, I call upon our bond. The response was immediate and overwhelming. A roar echoed from the depths of the pit, but this was not the sound of a mere animal. It was a call of recognition, of greeting, of joy. The very stone around the pit began to vibrate with harmonic frequencies, and the ancient symbols carved into the walls began to glow with soft, pulsing light. The crew of the Convergence stepped back in terror as something impossible happened before their eyes. The massive crimson dragon rose from the pit not by climbing but by flying, its enormous wings barely fitting within the chamber's confines. It emerged into the daylight like a living embodiment of ancient power, its scales catching the sunlight and throwing it back in cascades of red fire. But instead of attacking the assembled aliens, the dragon landed with surprising grace and immediately lowered its great head in a bow directed specifically at Marcus. By all the stars, Captain Thexvar whispered. It's showing deference. The dragon's mental voice reached not just Marcus, but every being present. The aliens staggered under the weight of direct telepathic contact from a mind vast and ancient beyond their comprehension. Greetings, servants of the younger species. The dragon's voice resonated in their minds. You stand in the presence of one who carries the blood of the First Shapers. Show proper respect. Several crew members actually fell to their knees, overwhelmed by the psychic pressure. Dr. Milani managed to remain standing, but her crystalline form was trembling visibly. The translations, she gasped. They were literal. Every word was literal. The dragon turned its burning gaze upon her. You show wisdom in your studies, Crystal Singer, but your understanding is still incomplete. The return of the Shaper children heralds changes your species are not prepared for. Commander Vexthai, still struggling with the implications of what he was witnessing, managed to ask, What changes? What are you talking about? Instead of answering directly, the dragon gestured with one massive wing toward the ruins around them. The ancient symbols began glowing brighter, and new text appeared on surfaces that had seemed blank moments before. These ruins are one of thousands scattered across the galaxy, the dragon explained. Outposts and temples built by the first shapers when they walked among the stars. Each one contains knowledge and technology that your current civilizations cannot even imagine. Marcus felt a surge of understanding through his connection with the dragon. You're saying humans built these? But that's impossible. These ruins predate known civilization by millions of years. Time is not linear for beings who transcended physical limitations, the dragon replied. Your ancestors were not the primitive creatures your current history suggests. They were explorers of realities beyond the physical plane, shapers of matter and energy on cosmic scales. The implications hit the assembled crew like a physical blow. If the dragon was telling the truth, then everything they thought they knew about galactic history, about the development of civilization, about humanity's place in the universe, was fundamentally wrong. Why? Captain Thexavar asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Why hide this knowledge? Why let humanity develop as if they were primitive newcomers? The dragon's eyes showed something that might have been sadness. Because they chose to start over. The first shapers reached heights of power and knowledge that ultimately proved problematic. They chose to shed their transcendent forms and begin again as a mortal species, hoping to find a different path to enlightenment. But the knowledge remains, Dr. Milani said, understanding beginning to dawn. In these ruins, in the genetic code they left behind. And in us, confirmed the dragon. We are their servants and their safeguards, tasked with protecting their legacy until such time as their children were ready to reclaim it. Marcus stepped forward, feeling the weight of destiny settling on his shoulders. And now? Are we ready now? The dragon exchanged a look with Marcus that spoke of communication beyond words. Images flashed through his mind, visions of approaching threats, of dark forces gathering at the edges of known space, of challenges that would require power and knowledge far beyond what current galactic civilization possessed. Ready or not, the time of choice approaches, the dragon replied grimly. Ancient enemies stir in the void between galaxies. Beings that remember the first shapers and seek revenge for old defeats. Your species, all species, will need the power of the ancients to survive what is coming. The crew of the Convergence was struggling to process the magnitude of what they were learning. Everything they had believed about reality was being rewritten before their eyes. Sub-Commander Krex, still kneeling but managing to speak, asked the question that was on everyone's mind. What does this mean for us? For our civilizations? The dragon turned its ancient gaze upon the assembled aliens. It means that the human you threw into the pit as sport is now awakening to his true heritage. It means that the balance of power in this galaxy is about to shift dramatically. And it means that those who showed wisdom and kindness will be remembered when the new age begins. Marcus felt the dragon's message clearly. This was both revelation and warning. The treatment he had received aboard the Convergence was noted, recorded, and would have consequences in the larger scheme of things. I don't want revenge, Marcus said aloud, both to the dragon and to his crewmates. But I also can't pretend this didn't happen. Things are going to change, and humanity's place in the galactic community is going to change with it. Dr. Milani stepped forward hesitantly. Marcus, we didn't know. The way you were treated, it was wrong regardless of your heritage. I should have done more to stop it. Marcus nodded acknowledgement, then looked at the others. Some, like Captain Thexvar, showed genuine remorse. Others, particularly Krex and Vextai, looked more concerned with the implications for their own positions than with the ethics of their actions. "The dragon is right," Marcus continued. "Ancient threats are stirring. I can feel them now, like shadows at the edge of consciousness. Humanity will need allies in what's coming, but those alliances will be built on respect and equality, not the assumption that humans are inferior beings to be tolerated." The dragon spread its massive wings, preparing for departure. "The other guardians must be awakened," it announced. "The temples must be opened, and the knowledge within made accessible to those worthy of it. The age of hidden power is ending." Before taking flight, the dragon addressed the crew one final time. "Return to your ship. Report what you have seen to your superiors. Tell them that the time of reckoning has begun, and that the children of the first Shapers walk among the stars once more." With that, the magnificent creature launched itself into the sky, its wings creating downdrafts that flattened the vegetation around the ruins. Within moments, it was a distant speck against the alien sun. The silence that followed was deafening. Finally, Captain Thexvar cleared his throat. "Mr. Chen," he said formally, "I believe we need to discuss what happens next." Marcus looked at his captain, former captain really, since the power dynamics had shifted irrevocably. "Yes, we do. Starting with a complete reevaluation of humanity's role in the Galactic Council and my status aboard this ship." "Of course," the captain replied quickly. "Whatever you require." But Marcus was already thinking beyond the immediate situation. The dragon's warnings about ancient enemies meant that preparation time was limited. Humanity would need to awaken to its true nature quickly, and that would require proof that couldn't be dismissed or covered up. "We're going back to Earth," Marcus decided, "and we're taking complete records of everything that happened here. But first, we're exploring these ruins thoroughly. If they contain the knowledge and technology of the first Shapers, then humanity needs that information immediately." Dr. Milani nodded eagerly. "I'll continue working on the translations. With what I've learned today, I should be able to decode much more of the text." As the crew began making preparations for an extended investigation, Marcus felt the dragon's presence in his mind, distant but constant. They were awakening others of their kind across the galaxy, preparing for what was to come. The universe was about to learn that humanity was far more than it appeared to be, and Marcus Chen, former outcast and victim of alien prejudice, was going to be at the center of the most significant revelation in galactic history. But first, he had to survive the attention that revelation would bring, from allies who would seek to use him, from enemies who would seek to destroy him, and from his own species who might not be ready to accept what they truly were. The return journey to Earth took 3 standard weeks, but for Marcus, it felt like a lifetime. Word of the discovery had spread through the ship's communication systems, despite Captain Thexvar's attempts to maintain secrecy. By the second day, every crew member aboard the Convergence knew that the human had somehow survived an encounter with ancient dragons and emerged claiming a heritage that predated galactic civilization. The reactions varied dramatically across species lines. The Malori, always spiritual in their outlook, seemed to accept the revelations with quiet awe. Several Zephyrians had requested private meetings with Marcus, eager to understand the historical implications, but others, particularly among the Gorlak and Draconian crew members, viewed the developments with suspicion and barely concealed hostility. Marcus spent most of his time in the ruins documentation chamber, working with Dr. Milani to catalog their findings. The ancient structures had yielded treasures beyond imagination, technological blueprints that made current galactic civilization look primitive, star maps showing hidden passages through space-time, and most disturbing of all, detailed warnings about the approaching threat from beyond the galactic rim. "The mathematical progressions are unlike anything in our databases," Dr. Milani reported during one of their sessions. Her crystalline form flickered with excited energy as she displayed holographic representations of the ancient texts. These aren't just technological specifications, they're fundamental rewrites of physics as we understand it. Marcus nodded, studying a diagram that showed how matter could be manipulated at the quantum level to create structures of impossible complexity. Since his transformation in the dragon pit, he found himself understanding concepts that should have been completely beyond human comprehension. "It's like having the user manual for reality itself," he murmured. No wonder the other species weren't ready for this knowledge. Through their work, a disturbing picture had emerged. The first Shapers hadn't simply been an advanced civilization. They had been beings who had transcended the normal limitations of physical existence. Their technology was so advanced, it was indistinguishable from what lesser species would call magic. And according to the warnings embedded in the ruins, they had used that power to fight a war against entities from outside the known universe, entities that were now returning. The dragons had been in constant mental contact with Marcus throughout the journey, sharing updates from across the galaxy. Other Guardian sites were awakening, revealing more repositories of ancient knowledge. But they were also detecting signs of the approaching enemy, reality distortions at the galactic edge, entire star systems going dark without explanation. The Devourers hunger once more. The Crimson Dragon's voice echoed in Marcus's mind during one of their communications. They have spent eons rebuilding their strength in the void between galaxies. When they arrive, they will seek to consume not just matter and energy, but the very concepts that define existence. "How long do we have?" Marcus asked during one of his private meditation sessions. "Months, perhaps a year. They move slowly, but inevitably. The first Shapers' defenses at the galactic boundary are failing after millions of years without maintenance." The weight of responsibility was crushing. Humanity needed to awaken to its heritage and master technologies that had taken their ancestors millennia to develop, and they needed to do it before an incomprehensible enemy arrived to end everything. As Earth grew larger in the ship's viewports, Marcus prepared himself for what would likely be the most difficult conversation in human history. He would need to convince Earth's government and the Galactic Council that everything they thought they knew was wrong, and that immediate action was required to prevent universal catastrophe. The first challenge came sooner than expected. As the Convergence entered Earth's solar system, they were intercepted by a massive fleet of both human and alien vessels. Word of their discoveries had traveled ahead of them through official channels, and various factions were clearly maneuvering for position. "Incoming transmission from the Earth Defense Command," reported the ship's communication officer, a nervous Zephyrian named Keltar. "They're demanding immediate turnover of all archaeological materials and requesting the human passenger submit to protective custody." Marcus felt a surge of anger that surprised him with its intensity. Protective custody? Captain Thexavar entered the bridge, his emerald scales showing signs of stress. "Mr. Chen, I've received orders from the Galactic Council to escort you directly to their headquarters on Nexus Prime. They're concerned about the implications of your claims." "Of course they are," Marcus replied grimly. "They're scared that their entire power structure is about to be overturned." Dr. Milani appeared beside them, her crystalline form practically vibrating with excitement. "Marcus, you need to see this. I've been monitoring communications traffic throughout the system. It's not just political maneuvering. There are scientific expeditions launching toward every human archaeological site in known space." Through his enhanced senses, Marcus could feel something else. A resonance from Earth itself, as if the planet was responding to his presence. The dragons had mentioned that the first Shapers had left more than just ruins and technology behind. They had embedded aspects of their power into the worlds they had touched, creating a network of connected sites that could be activated by their descendants. "Change of plans," Marcus announced. "We're going to Earth first. I need to make contact with something there." "That's not advisable," Captain Thexavar protested. "The political situation is extremely volatile. If you're seen as choosing Earth over the Galactic Council, the Galactic Council can wait," Marcus interrupted, and his voice carried new harmonics that made the bridge crew step back instinctively. "There are forces at work here that are bigger than politics." As if summoned by his words, space around the convergence began to shimmer. Reality twisted, and suddenly 3 dragons materialized in the void around the ship. Not illusions or holograms, but physical beings that had somehow crossed the vacuum of space without ships or protection. The bridge erupted in alarms as the massive creatures paced the vessel, their mental voices reaching everyone aboard. The child of the Shapers speaks truth. The Crimson Dragon's voice resonated through every mind on the ship. Earth calls to its children. The awakening cannot be delayed by the concerns of lesser species. The intercepting fleet found themselves facing an impossible situation. Weapons locked onto the dragons detected no vulnerabilities. The creatures' scales seemed to exist in a state of quantum uncertainty that made them effectively invulnerable to conventional attacks. More disturbing was the realization that the dragons could apparently travel through space without any visible means of propulsion, suggesting technological capabilities that rendered current military thinking obsolete. "This is Admiral Harrison of the Earth Defense Fleet," came a tight communication from the lead human vessel. "Unknown entities, you are in violation of Earth space. Identify yourselves immediately." Marcus stepped forward to respond. But the Golden Dragon's voice filled the communication channel first. "We are the sacred guardians, servants of those who shaped the stars before your species learned to dream. We escort the awakening child to his destiny. Stand aside." The political ramifications were immediate and explosive. Every major news network in the solar system was broadcasting footage of the dragons, and emergency sessions were being called in government buildings across Earth and throughout Galactic Council space. But Marcus was no longer focused on politics. As Earth grew larger before them, he could feel something vast stirring beneath its surface. The first Shapers had not left their home world unchanged when they transcended physical existence. They had left behind guardians, repositories of power, and most importantly, they had left behind trials that would test whether their descendants were worthy of their inheritance. "Mount Shasta," the Blue Dragon's voice whispered in his mind. "The primary nexus point on your birth world. There you will find the first of the great trials." "Set course for Mount Shasta," Marcus ordered, "and send a message to Earth Defense Command. Tell them that humanity is about to discover its true heritage, whether they're ready or not." The convergence descended through Earth's atmosphere escorted by 3 impossible dragons, while news networks around the globe struggled to explain what was happening. Governments demanded answers that didn't exist. Scientists proposed theories that couldn't account for what they were witnessing, and religious leaders proclaimed everything from the second coming to the end times. At Mount Shasta, something ancient was stirring. Deep beneath the mountain, systems that had lain dormant for millions of years began to activate in response to Marcus's approach. The Earth itself was awakening to welcome home the children of its first inhabitants. As they landed in the shadow of the mountain, Marcus could feel the weight of destiny settling around him. This was where everything would change, where humanity would either rise to meet its cosmic inheritance or prove unworthy of the legacy left by the first Shapers. The dragons took positions around the mountain's base, their presence causing reality to shimmer with barely contained power. The Crimson Dragon's voice reached Marcus one final time before the trial began. "Remember, young Shaper, that power without wisdom is the path to destruction. Your ancestors learned this truth too late. Do not repeat their mistakes." Marcus nodded, understanding that he was about to face challenges that would test not just his worthiness to inherit the power of the first Shapers, but his ability to guide humanity away from the mistakes that had forced their ancestors to abandon their transcendent existence. Behind him, the crew of the Convergence and representatives of multiple governments watched in awe and terror as ancient mechanisms began to reveal themselves. The mountain split open to reveal a crystalline chamber that pulsed with energies that predated known physics. The trial of the first Shapers was beginning, and with it, the ultimate test of whether humanity deserved to reclaim its place among the Shapers of reality itself. As Marcus stepped toward the chamber, he carried with him not just the hopes of his own species, but the responsibility for preparing an entire galaxy to face an enemy that threatened the very foundations of existence. The age of hiding was ending. The time of reckoning had begun, and humanity was about to discover whether they were the heroes of their own legend or just another species too small to grasp the forces they had unleashed. The ancient chamber pulsed with welcome, and Marcus Chen, formerly the lowest-ranked human aboard an alien vessel, stepped forward to claim an inheritance that would reshape the universe itself.